Hello and welcome to the program. In May, Europe will go to the polls in one of the most important parliament elections in decades. Polls suggest that nationalistic and eurosceptic parties will make considerable gains at the expense of the centre and far-left groups in the upcoming elections, putting into question the next phase of European integration. To discuss this, we are joined in the studio today by Valeriy Kravchenko, Senior Research Fellow at the National Institute for Strategic Studies. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon.
So, the general loss of support for mainstream party meant that we would not be able to form a grand coalition in the parliament. What's your stand on this?
You see that the last trend we could found it's the increasing of popularity of eurosceptic parties, populistic parties, and chauvinistic parties also, and it's the general trend we could found elsewhere in Europe, in the national parliaments also, and what we are expecting, and unfortunately polls saying that it's the reality of European Union. It's increasing of the seats of the members of European Parliament on the next elections, and it's a threatening trend because of the nature of the people which could represent that parties. We see that the last trends in Italy, for example, or in France, saying about some points of which are not in favor of Ukraine, especially in Italy, because we see as the Prime Minister, which is representative of the coalition between the League of North, it's typical, let's say, populistic party, and the majority, the major party which have won the elections, it's Five Star. So Giuseppe Conte, he is proclaiming about the sanctions, about the sanctions against Russia, and that it's a good idea to decrease the influence of the sanctions. So as for Ukraine, such idea it looks like a scoring, and for Europe also, because if you are decreasing this pressure to Russia, we'll have in one not so good day even the recognition of illegal annexation of Crimea, and its collapse. It's collapse about the values of the Europe. So if we will see these members of the parliament with such views in the European Parliament, that is threatening to the unity and to the values of what we are naming Europe.
Now, would you say that this populist and nationalistic trend is only a reflection of certain, as you said, international domestic policies, let's say, you know, in Italy, and as you said, in certain countries, but it's also fueled by Russia? There is no mysteries around the fact that Mr. Salvini's party is funded by Mr. Putin. There's no mysteries that the former National Front, now National Rassemblement National, is being funded by Mr. Putin. So how does it?
Yeah, Marine Le Pen and also other political parties in Germany, for example, Alternative for Germany, it was a lot of rumors about the funding from the Russian Federation.
It's not really rumors anymore, is it?
Yeah, mainly. But we could speak about the two approaches here, because yes, from the one side, it was inspired by the Russian Federation, such movements, let's say, anti-systemic movements, and movements against Europe, against its values, its eurosceptic movements, and the populist and chauvinistic also movements. Chauvinistic, I'm telling, because the migration policy and about the ideas about the migrants. And from the another part, it's a second approach, because these movements were born in European Union, even without help of the Russian Federation, because it's the mood of the people living in the Europe now, and unfortunately it's about the political culture, let's say. Europeans were proud with their political culture. Unfortunately, this new information era, with a new era of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and a lot of information warfare and hybrid warfare tools. It's ruining this traditional political culture of Europeans. And Europeans sometimes misunderstanding and don't understand what is happening in reality, and why it's so important to speak about Russia, for example, about the economic sanctions. And not only because the next phase of Russia and its intentions towards Europe, it's to stay the anti-Americanism and Americanism, because Americanism, it's what we could see in Poland, for example, in Romania, in Hungary, even in Hungary, and in other countries, in Baltic states, in other countries of the eastern flank of NATO. And anti-Americanism, unfortunately, we could speak about some trends of anti-Americanism even in Germany, in France, and it's another alternative center, and it's how to split Europe, how to split EU, and how to split NATO, how to ruin NATO.
Now, there is an interesting and, let's say, painful contradiction here, is that some of the deputies, I'm again thinking of deputies from former National Front and from these far-right and populist parties, have a seat and are being paid by the European Union to destroy, basically, a European Union. How come that kind of situation can happen? And to ask a sort of like controversial question, is Europe too democratic to allow that kind of people having a seat there?
Yes, yes. The answer is definitely yes. And democracy is a weakness, unfortunately, and Russia using this weakness. And autocracy is not the value of European Union. But we could speak about the so-called non-liberal, illiberal democracies.
Illiberal democracy.
And if you are talking about the illiberal democracies, it's Poland, for example, and with Jarosław Kaczynski and his political party, it's Orban in Hungary, and it's working. It's working with the liberal democracies, and it's not autocracy, it's not autocratic view as it is for Putin, for Russia. But such communities, such states which have the well-developed democracy, for example, even not in Europe, United States. United States.
Course, indeed,
it's unique what happened in the last presidential elections with Trump, with his presidency. And yes, next year will be the next president election in the United States, and it's another option to undermine the climate in the Northern America. Yes, the good option for Russia is now to undermine here with these trends which having the presence in the Europe. And what I have to point in that view, that we are seeing about the battle for Europe in the future, in the maybe few years. It's a battle between the populists and between the anti-systemic movements. And we will not see the traditional parties like right or left or central or conservative or socialist, because they are losing. And in any country of especially Western Europe, somewhere in Portugal, maybe in Spain, they still preserve the electorate, but in traditional countries of the West, it's countries like France or Germany or Italy or Austria or Netherlands. So we are seeing this trend that anti-systemic movements will fight with populists, and it's a bad scenario for Europe, and especially if we are talking about the United Europe, about the European Union, because populists having the stimulus to fight for sovereignty. And it's a fight between the what we are naming the values, European joint values, and it's sovereignty, some territorial entities inside the European Union, and the members of the European Union. And Brexit is just speeding this process.
Indeed. But so would you say that European Union should revise its process and become, let's say, a little bit harsher towards illiberal democracies that don't respect its value? The whole process of potentially Poland losing votes, the right to vote in the European Union, is taking a long time. But would you say that if that happens, it would be a good thing and a good sign, or a bad sign? A good sign that Europe is strong, or a bad sign that if you don't follow the rules, you're out of it?
Yes, the rules is important. The rules is important, and if you are talking about the progress, for example, here in Ukraine, and all our allies saying that we have to provide this progress with the rules, with the democratic rules, and with the superiority of some issues which are named like human rights and something like that. And sometimes what we could speak about the Europe now, sometimes it's not working. And sometimes, especially now in the conditions of the hybrid warfare, of the external threat, let's name it threat, because it's a threat. A lot of people in somewhere in Germany or France, they don't understand what is happening. It's about the informational era and the misinformation, disinformation, propaganda. And they are voting for some people which are giving them the situational decisions, like you will get now, and tomorrow it's not an option for you. What will happen tomorrow? So and that's the fight for these votes, and it's a bad trend. And if you are going to speak about the challenges, two fears of the people living in the EU. First of all, it's a fear about the South, let's say.
Yeah,
it's migrants.
General fantasy.
Let's say it's South. And the second, it's an East. And it's abnormal, for example, for Portugal, because they're thinking probably about the Atlantic Ocean, something like that, about the other problems. And if you're talking about the countries here in the middle of the Europe, yes, it's an East, and it's a revenge and revisionism of Russian Federation, and it's nuclear fear also. So it's how to protect, what is defense, what is the meaning of that world, and will it be possible to defend the Europe, which will be split with all these issues we are talking about the war between populist and anti-systemic movements.
Which brings me to my next question, which is the perception of these elections. Let's say locally, like from my country, like presidential election is the most important. Then comes hardly behind legislative, but European election are not considered as important. People don't really know their deputy. People don't really know what's happening there. How to make people aware that these elections might actually shape, well, the future of Europe, of course, but also the future of the sovereignty and of their country?
It's a problem because of the symbolic meaning of these elections, and sometimes you will see who will go to this parliament, to the European Parliament. It's pensioners. It's a political pensioners from elsewhere from Europe. Not so many young and ambitious politicians coming to EU Parliament. And it's a problem because we're talking about the prevailing of the national sovereignty, about the national policy, national parliament, national elections. And if you are talking that it's not important, it's important. It's important here because, as we see, it's about the shaping of the future of Europe, of European Union. It's easy to undermine for external actors, undermine the importance of that, and it's easy to ruin from the inside the Europe with such, let's say, political conditions which are demonstrated by the people who are voting. We will see. It's about the people. How many people will go to these elections. It also will be a marker, an indicator, and it will show whether people really seen the importance of what is naming like European elections now, especially in the conditions of Brexit, for example, in the conditions of some destructive actions which are happening with Europe. And a lot of fears of the people we could speak about, and it's a fight of between that fears and in between the tomorrow, between some conditions which are given the confidence of the people.
Well, thank you for this overview. We will, of course, closely follow this election. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio today.
Thank you.
That was Valeriy Kravchenko, Senior Research Fellow at the National Institute for Strategic Studies. Thank you for watching the program, and stay tuned for the rest.